Hello and welcome to ATARC's Thursday After Lunch IT webinar series. Today, we will be discussing what the current status, modern projects, and the drive forward for federal DevSecOps platforms used to push modernization, operational efficiency, and cybersecurity. My name is Kirsten Patton, and I am the Working Group Program Manager here at ATARC, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel. I would like to welcome all of our attendees and a special thanks to Allison James, Dan Gossley, Brent Holden, and the rest of the HashiCorp team. They've truly been a great partner to ATARC. This afternoon, we are going to hear from our keynote speaker, Nick Shalane. Then we will begin our panel for today, and we will hear from our panelists, which will be followed by a Q&A, and we are also going to incorporate some poll questions as we go. Up first, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Nicholas Shalane. He is the Chief Software Officer over at the United States Air Force. Nick, we're really looking forward to your keynote. Over to you.
Thank you. Here we go. I was turning my camera. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. So obviously, I have always a couple of fancy charts, but I want this to be a conversation, and of course want to hear if anybody has questions. But I'm going to share my screen as well, and maybe go over a couple of quick piece of data, which I think might resonate with the group that are trying to kind of move to the DevSecOps construct. So hopefully you can see my screen. Again, as always, we have a lot of the information we share is all public on our website, so please check it out on software.ai.mil, particularly under DSOP documents. But we also launched a new website, p1.dso.mil, so check it out. You're going to find a lot of great information about Platform One, and the source code and everything we do is also accessible there. So that's always helpful if you're trying to move to DevSecOps and use our existing code base to move to DevSecOps. So when you look at a large organization like DoD moving to DevSecOps, I think some of the big lessons learned is we need to invest in enterprise services, and we need to do that correctly at the right scale with the right acquisition model, but also making sure we're not using a one-size-fits-all in terms of options to satisfy the needs of all of these different use cases. So as you can see with Platform One, we have multiple partnerships across industry and also within the department with the Navy, the Army, and Fourth Estate, and of course the Air Force, but also a lot of startups, non-traditionals, AFRL, DARPA, science technology researchers, all the way to the defense industrial base. So you want to be able to have options, but at the same time, not too many options, not too few options. It's always a very interesting balance. And you can't please everybody, but I'm always begging everybody to understand that sometimes, enterprise solutions are going to bring a 95% solution, and that's great. And yes, the 5% could sometimes be enough for you to walk away and to build your own capability, but very often it's not going to be the case. And so you really want to instead help the enterprise service to build the 5%. So if you put your energy and your focus on that 5% delta, you can really help the rest of the community by effectively collaborating and growing together instead of reinventing the wheel in vacuum. So that's really kind of the message we're trying to push for, and really getting more adoption of enterprise services. The only way to scale. If you look at how much time and money is being spent on Platform One, I mean, we're talking between 60 to 100 million this year on Platform One. So as you can imagine, most teams don't even have that kind of budget to do anything. So that obviously makes a lot of sense to do it centrally with the right talent. We such have a tough time finding people anyway. That's probably the only way you can get any meaningful scale. Now, if you look at some of the numbers of Platform One, it's really getting exciting because we have now a majority of the team obviously comprised of contractors. I think we have now actually 260 contractors. The numbers are not always up to date. More than 30 companies, I believe, on contract. So we have a lot of diversity in terms of execution. And you can see we have two main services, the Big Bang, which is the ability to take Platform One and deploy it inside of your environment. So a lot of agencies, including different teams at the VA, at DOJ and DHS, and many others are looking at how to take the Big Bang and deploy it inside of their environment or their cloud or on-premise environments. We have a lot of the top largest DoD weapon systems on Big Bang today. And then we have the Party Bus, right? So the Party Bus is a multi-tenant environment that we host and maintain, which effectively is an instance of Big Bang that Platform One is providing as a PaaS. You can see we now have 3,200 developers on Party Bus. It's a cost per developer per month based on the number of tools we bring to life and how much support that the teams are going to need. We have 2,500 microservices built within the last 8 months. It's pretty incredible. All these can be reused across the enterprise, so that gives a lot of flexibility and enable reuse across the teams. We have 41 applications in production, which are effectively a mix of Lego blocks put together, and 209 teams moving to Party Bus, so that's pretty significant as well. We also have the Iron Bank. So for people that don't know, we centrally assess and accredit containers for all of DoD, but we have about 14 agencies outside of DoD using Iron Bank now. So feel free to use the containers that we have. Of course, you may have to buy licenses for some of the commercial products that you see there, but we have a lot of open source products as well. So we have 450 containers that are now approved for use DoD-wide, all the way to the highest specification levels. And now we release software 21 times a day in production, which is pretty cool for a government organization. So one thing I wanted to share as well with the group is kind of the ecosystem we're building. Effectively, when I started, you had a lot of these teams being created all over the U.S., but we're seeing a lot of reinventing the wheel, and effectively everybody was focused on building a factory instead of focusing on using a factory to build software. So I think that the big lessons learned for teams that are going through that journey in a large organization, like another federal agency, for example, you still want to stop that bleeding pretty quickly, because the more you wait, the more teams are going to create existing platforms, and then you're going to have to merge. And I can tell you the merger is the biggest pain in my life. So that often takes 2 years and a lot of discussions between teams to figure out how to do that. And it's really painful. So you want to stop the bleeding fast and provide the enterprise service to your team so they don't have to create their own construct to move to DevSecOps. So that's probably the number one lessons learned is don't wait to start merging and providing DevSecOps pipeline as a service and giving options, not one size fits all, but not hundreds of options either. So keep that in mind as well. Now, like I said, we have two main services where you can find our source code in containers. Repo One has all the source code of everything we do, all the Kubernetes distributions, all the containers, all the Terraform script to instantiate Platform One anywhere. And again, we open source all that code, so there's just no reason not to use it. We have countless commercial organizations using it outside of DoD as well. And we have the Iron Bank, which is the centralized repo of containers, so you can go and check it out and see the containers that are approved for use in DoD. And if you have a commercial product, obviously you can follow the onboarding guide to get your container approved in DoD, so you can then sell your licenses to the department. There's a question I see on the chat about what kind of commercial products we support on Platform One. We have, I would say, 450 approved containers now. I would say probably 200 of those are commercial products. So we have a very wide diversity of products between cyber tools, between development tools, API gateways, 23 databases. We support 16 programming languages, all the collaboration tools, anything around Kubernetes and service meshes and container registry. I mean, you name it. We have a lot of options, both open source and commercial options. And by the way, if a commercial company has an open source version of their product, we mandate them to put both on Iron Bank. So they have to put both the commercial product and the open source version as well. We also have data, AI, machine learning, deep learning products, and so on. So a lot of options, easier to go and check out the list. Also, we have a container registry called registry1.dso.mil, where you can see we're using Harbor as a registry to be able to provide a live container registry that you can directly pull from. So if you want to be able to directly automate the download of containers, you go to registry1.dso.mil, and you're going to see the entire list of containers. Like I said, the Big Bang is really game-changing. We're very excited about this. So for people that have not checked it out, go on that website on April 1. You're going to see the Big Bang code where you can instantiate the entire Platform One stack on your enclave, whether it's on your Amazon GovCloud or whatever that you're using today. It could be at the edge, it could be air-gapped, it could be on-premise. And so check it out, because that's going to streamline your deployment and your ability to not have to reinvent the wheel. And you get a full, DevSecOps stack with multiple options. And we use GitOps, so you're going to see Algo and Flux to be able to pull from Git. A lot of great tools. So everything is already hardened and ready to go. So that's a great way for teams to get started. We have lots of different primes and subs starting to use Big Bang also internally, even for non-DoD work. So that's pretty exciting to see. Also wanted to point out that we are deploying Platform One using Big Bang at the edge. So obviously we're running on jets and bombers and different systems like that, but we also have multiple hardware options from the traditional Snowball to specific hardware with HP Edgeline 8000 to Dell options to Amazon Outpost, so Azure Stack. So effectively you can run Platform One and Big Bang pretty much anywhere you want. So that's pretty exciting as well. Now, we also are pushing the feeding and streaming. So we use Kafka to be able to, with KSQL, to be able to create microservices and data streaming across all these services, and having the 100+ connectors and AI, ML, enrichment and filtering and all these great data capabilities between Kubernetes and all of the existing data lakes and warehouse that we have. So everything we do is running on Kubernetes and is elastic and cloud agnostic. So that's also very exciting. So check it out on the Platform One website. You're gonna see a lot of information about the different services. I know we are almost out of time, but I guess if we have questions, we can certainly look at questions. But we have this slide deck here. I'm not going to be able to walk through some of the different products we're launching between our single sign-on or PKI, supporting also non-CAC authentication. We have a diode to push containers from the low side to the high side to classified environments. We have created a SOC, a Security Operations Center, as well, to be able to tie to our theme and SOAR capability. So again, if you want to partner, if you want to see what's going on and how we accredit and how we build things, this is Registry One if you want to get the link here. So a lot of great services that we are providing to the broader DoD and also outside of DoD as well. So again, check it out, and feel free always to reach out to us if you have questions.
Thanks, Nick. That was awesome. We really appreciate you taking the time and sharing that with us.
Of course.
All right, so excellent. We are now going to begin our panel for this session. So if our panelists could please come on camera, and I'm going to briefly introduce them, maybe give a wave to the camera when I say your name and who you are. We have Raven Manuel. She is a senior application developer and architect and a DevOps engineer over at the Smithsonian Institution for the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And we also have Ian Anderson, who is the lead DevOps engineer at the Naval Sea Systems Command. We also have Brian Fox, the Director of National Security and Intelligence Portfolio at 18F. Our next panelist is Daniel McCune. He is the Acting Associate Deputy Assistant Secretary, EPMO, at the Office of Information and Technology at the Department of Veterans Affairs. And last but not least, we have Brent Holden, who is the Global Field CTO at HashiCorp. So got a really great panel today. I'm going to ask our panelists if we could just go around, share a little bit about some of the work that you're doing, add a little bit of context to the different projects that you're on currently as it relates to the topic of this webinar discussion. So first, if we could start with Raven, please.
Thank you, Kirsten. I appreciate the introduction, and it's great to be here. At NMAAHC, I shouldn't be saying it that way, NMAAHC, what we're doing with our DevOps journey is that we're actually solidifying a framework. Our business problem is that, and it's a unique business problem. Every government agency does have a bunch of contractors like we do. But our projects, we don't have software. We make like digital web products. So we have our main website. We do exhibitions. We have interactives. We have a lot of different one-offs. Like we don't have consistent projects that we work on all the time except for our website. So we need to come up with a framework that's adaptable and flexible to be able to implement the DevOps across these platforms. And the other thing is, and it's really kind of cool to see the platform one and what Nick was talking about, but one of the problems that we would have is that our development teams have all different skill sets. So to come up with some type of with some tooling, it's mostly around tooling, to standardize on tools may not be possible for us because all of the teams have different the level of skills they're doing, and whether or not it's appropriate to actually put our digital products into like containers or to use Kubernetes. So that's what we're doing up at the museum.
Excellent, thank you so much. Next, I'd like to hear from Ian.
Yes, so I am at Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren. I'm actually down at their Dam Neck activity in Virginia Beach, Virginia. So I serve, in my capacity, I'm a lead DevOps, DevSecOps engineer, helping out with our hybrid cloud initiative for the entire Warfare Center, as well as the software factory that we are looking to start up. So one of the very unique things with the Warfare Center, unlike some of the larger companies in industry or even large organizations within the government, is we're a working capital fund. So all of our teams in groups bring in projects and they work on them. There's no funding that comes down for us other than basically to keep the lights on. So all of our money and projects can come in. It's not just specifically for the Navy. And one of the other things is that, we also have to be cognizant that with our Navy projects, we may be working on a portion, and then we have the Warfare Center at Crane working on another portion. So we have a unique problem, kind of like what Raven said, is there are some groups that are, doing the automation, they have their pipelines going, they're heavily into DevOps, DevSecOps, and then you have other groups that are asking what is a container, some asking what is Git, how do we use that. So the unique challenge for us when we're starting up this software factory to get groups to kind of move towards DevOps or DevSecOps, or also help enable them if they're already doing it, is how do we basically help those groups get up to the point, where we would like them to be, but not hinder the groups that are already there and want to continue down the path. So taking a look at, the various tools and what we're calling now as our first cut, it's we call the factory foundation, looking at those tools such as Kubernetes and Artifact Repository that help us do that. One of the things that we look at for it is, we're in this COVID-19 full max telework, but we also want these tools to help in the opposite situation, to where, if something was to happen, we all had to be at the warfare center, no outside connectivity. Can we still, do the work and work on our mission critical systems?
Wow, great. Thank you. I would like to next hear from Brian.
Hey, good morning from Denver, Colorado. Yeah, I'm Brian Fox with 18F. I lead our national security and intelligence portfolio here. And gosh, as far as from a DevOps standpoint, what are we working on? We tend to work very holistically with our partners. Here in the recent past, it's been the U.S. Marine Corps, Defense Intelligence Agency, U.S. Air Force, et cetera. And Department of Energy is another defense-oriented one we've worked with. But in the end, we look to improve their systems and ensure that their users, whether it's the American public or the warfighter or even their internal analysts, et cetera, have a better experience with that. So like in one of those entities, we were working diligently with them to help them improve data discovery within their particular center. And so we examine people, culture, process, and technology as a part of that. In some cases, we have to educate our partner that the people and culture and the processes they're working through are creating the technology. So the technology that surrounds them and maybe the problem set, that the people, process, and culture are all a part of that. So we work very holistically with that, and oftentimes it's the adoption of agile methods, and then eventually getting into DevOps or DevSecOps as well. I think most government agencies inside the national security and intelligence realm of government and outside are looking to get there faster to produce that software, their systems, and to get there faster, but also have those systems easier to use and more powerful for the user, whatever that might be. So not only is it DevSecOps, but it's also bringing that human-centered design to it as well. So, but that's some of the stuff that we're working on, and it's here with the new administration and the highlights around climate change, racial justice, response to COVID. 18F has been really busy, rightfully so, and that includes in that NS&I space as well. So exciting times.
Definitely, thank you. I like your 18F sweat or hoodie too. Next, Daniel, please.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to talk to smart IT people. I lead software delivery for the VA, and we're in the middle of our DevOps transformation. And I say the middle, knowing that the end isn't always certain. And so we are in the middle, and we may be in the middle for a while. Our biggest challenge is really scale. VA is the second largest federal agency, the largest healthcare integrated network in the United States. And so sometimes it feels like in our DevOps transformation, we're trying to turn a ship. But for me, so far, there's been really three key drivers in our transformation. The first one has been a fundamental, which is agility and speed. We have to get faster at delivery, and we have to get faster to pivot, as I think COVID has proven to many of us. And I think we need, even in federal government, to prove that we're relevant. And that's certainly something industry knows, but maybe we've been a little slow to adopt in federal government. And we have seen improvement. We've seen about a 4x improvement in our time to delivery. And that's, a great advantage to us, and certainly helped us when we ramped up during COVID to track PPE and positive cases. And now even with immunizations, tracking our immunization delivery. The second thing is transformation from project to product. And we come from a typical siloed IT organization where development throws it over the wall to operations. And I use the metaphor, development likes to throw hand grenades over the wall. They throw it over and then run away as fast as they can. and operations has T-Rex arms, right? They don't want to accept anything that comes over to them because they know they weren't involved in the development, in the design of that, and no amount of documentation makes them content or secure in accepting that product. Today, we have persistent, self-sufficient product teams that own the life cycle. So that's been a big win for us. And the last thing is no code, low code. And I come from a development background, and as I advanced in my career, I started seeing larger and larger bodies of legacy code. And today in VA, we've got millions of lines of code written in COBOL, ARM, Ruby on Rails, Java, .NET, you name it. And all that code needs tech refresh. It is increasingly harder to update with new features. Some of it's 40 years old. And our understanding of that code gets watered down every time we transition from one contractor to another. So for me, I look at every line of code as technical debt. And low code, no code really allows me to kind of flip the script. It solves many of our problems. It allows me to outsource a lot of those things to vendors. So security, security patching in particular, hosting, operations and maintenance, even modernization, I can outsource to the vendor. And I really believe firmly that we're in a faster, safer, cheaper model when we move to low code, no code. So thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And Brent.
Hi there. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brent Holden. Being the field CTO for HashiCorp, I get to see a wide range of customers. I think from our largest financial services customers to some of the other verticals, including public sector, and get to see how they operate our stuff. Just as some loose examples, I think what I heard today from some of the other panelists was absolutely terrific. I think hearing Nicholas talk about some of the solutions that Air Force is putting in place. A lot of those solutions are powered by HashiCorp software. Hearing about that shift from a project to product mindset, moving towards a more manufacturing mindset in terms of IT delivery, and really thinking about people, culture, process, and tools like Brian mentioned. I think those are all things that are sort of tip of tongue for HashiCorp. For us, I think just simply put, not to get too into the sales pitch, but I think when people think of HashiCorp, they think of HashiCorp in a DevOps context. The reason for that is, I think, pretty simple. I think when you really boil it down, agility is sort of the metrics, right? When Nicholas pointed to metrics that he's measuring the Air Force on, those are really agility metrics, and that's what HashiCorp helps solve. I think when I think about those key metrics we help customers walk through, many of them public sector, it's really around how do we move faster. And a lot of what HashiCorp does is, just simply put, we replace ticketing queues with automation. And we operate at different levels of the stack. I think when when customers start using our stuff, it's really around putting automation in place. How do we reduce the amount of friction there is for developers consuming services, for example, and being able to deploy applications rapidly? I think the next sort of generation of that is DevSecOps, where yes, you want to move faster, but you have to do so in a secure manner. A lot of our larger customers, including public sector, they're really struggling with this shift between the physical data center and this new logical data center that they have to provision to. And because it changes the security model, they have to protect against. And so really it's not just good enough to move fast, but you really have to provide things like policy and governance around what you're doing. You have to start thinking about data security in multiple layers, securing your rest, securing in transit, and really securing access to those different systems in different ways. So I'm pretty excited to be here today to talk about with my other panelists how we do that.
Great, thank you so much. So with that, I would like to go ahead and put up our first poll question for the day, please, Alyssa. And the poll is, do you know the difference between DevOps and DevSecOps? So pretty straightforward. You can answer either yes, I think so, I do not, or I'm not really sure. So please, if you're an attendee, go ahead and answer that. And if you're a panelist, you can go ahead and answer it as well. And then we will discuss a question related to the results. So whenever you feel like we have gotten enough responses, we can go ahead and see what people have to say. If they have any idea, or if they, all right, it looks like most people claim to know the difference, but let's talk about it. And I'm gonna ask Raven if she could kick us off. Definitions, DevOps versus DevSecOps, and why do I feel like this is somewhat controversial?
It's well, because people like me get really irritated because there are two terms for it. And I'm really glad that we're speaking about it. I personally, I heard recently somebody, I don't remember where it was on some webinar, that they said that the difference between DevSecOps and DevOps is the fact that security is bolted on to DevOps and it's integrated into DevSecOps. And I was like, what? That is like, it is, to me, just the names themselves indicate exactly where security is. DevOps, the methodology, as a purist, is the integration of operations with development. And in all the other, in the organizations that I have been in, security is part of operations. And so when you're integrating development with operations, you're actually integrating security with development. And in development, as a developer, we handle security like a little bit different. It's like we have to make sure that we don't have memory leaks. We have to make sure that the libraries that we use are up to date. We have to make sure that that we're not we're doing really proper code and we're following strict code methodologies if there are some, and as well as ensuring that when we do our unit tests on just on a web product or a product, that we're able to get the that we're doing what's right as far as what we can do for security. And then as it goes through the pipeline, like for testing, and we're doing integration testing and system testing, there's tests that are security related too. But by the time the application or the software product moves from the development and the integration cycle to the deployment cycle, there are different security tests that actually have to happen. So we've got like the scans and access control and all of these other security things that happen. So when you're saying DevOps, you are actually including security in there. It's integrated. When you say DevSecOps, to me, that means you just took security out of these two things. You made them its own silo and its own thing. And if you look at the word DevSecOps, it actually looks like security is bolted on and bringing the end of devs and the beginning of ops together. And so that doesn't, to me, it doesn't mean that that's integrated. DevSecOps does not, to me, mean that security is integrated. It means that security is separate and it's being highlighted that it's important. And DevOps to me means that because security is built in, that it's part of the whole process. And my last soapbox thing, and then I'll just get down from it, is that I think that having these two terms confuses people who are new to DevOps that are trying to get started with it. Because if you talk to somebody and they're using DevSecOps all the time, then that person might say, well, why do I want to do DevOps? And they don't even really know what DevOps is, right? So they're going to say, well, why? Of course I want to have security. Why would I not want to have security built in? So I kind of get agitated, as you can tell, when these two terms are used, because they're just confusing. There's no need for it. There is no DevNetOps. There's no, you know what I mean? These other pieces that are part of operations are not being highlighted because it's a given. They're part of it. They're needed. So if there was a vote today, I would vote to get rid of the word DevSecOps. The end.
Thank you for sharing those insights. And, moving forward, the topic of this panel is probably pretty important that people understand that. Do any of our other panelists want to weigh in on what Raven just shared with us? Go for it, Brian.
Yeah, Raven, I'd love your thoughts on that. And I'm actually going to go the other way, but in spirit, I'm right there with you. And whether it's DevOps or DevSecOps, I just tend to think it's all in the spirit of integration. I'm like jumping in right there with what Raven described. It's that power of integration. And in guild sessions and 18F, we've even teamed up with our accessibility guild and in DevOps to talk about, gosh, if you take DevOps, you could add security in there. You could add accessibility. And I think some of the underlying flagstones, especially in the 21st century, is software drives everything. And so if you look in your organization and you're not an integrated part of that development operation, how are you impacting, or how are you bringing value to the organization and to the users? And so I think that's what's kind of happening there. And I think more and more folks, whether it's the folks that are rightly concerned about accessibility or security, or you just keep adding it in, like Raven described it. It really is about DevOps or DevSecOps, but it's about integration. It's not about bolting it on, and it's about getting those folks involved very early on, not when the software's done and then they start scratching their heads and putting a stop to it because rules weren't followed, or it's not as there's accessibility issues or security, whatever it might be. It's about teeing that up at the very front, integrating it, because software in the 21st century is driving the value for an organization. And if your little shop or office in that organization or agency isn't a part of DevOps, DevSecOps, whatever acronym you want to have, then how are you generating value, right? I think that's probably one of the big ones there.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Any of the other panelists want to weigh in before we move on to another question?
Yeah, I'll just say something quickly. I completely agree with Raven, and you probably can't use both because it does get confusing. But yeah, completely agree that everything, if you're practicing, actually going ahead and doing all the things, whether it's secure, all that. I think one of the best ways it was summed up was I saw talk of Nick Shalane, where it said you can put anything you want in there, just kind of like querying a database, DevSecOps. It's it's all supposed to be getting done, but you don't have to sit there and actually name every portion of it out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and jump to our next poll question so we can make sure everyone gets their CPE credits, but it'll tie into our next question as well. So Alyssa, if you could put that up, how confident are you in your agency's journey with DevSecOps? So fully confident, some confidence, slight confidence, no confidence. Hopefully that's not the case. Or you're unsure. And again, attendees, panelists, feel free to answer, and then we will put up the results. And I have a question that goes along with it. And I want to direct this question to Daniel to start us off, but we can go ahead and take a look at the results, please, Alyssa. Okay, so they have some confidence or they're fully confident. That's pretty good. So Daniel, I have a question for you when it comes to, could you please share some lessons learned or best practices that your agency has acquired when it comes to DevOps? And I also want to ask, how does low code, no code play a part in this journey, if it does or does not?
Yeah, great question and interesting poll results. Yeah, low code, no code has been key for us. Number one, it's helped us accelerate. Number two, I think it has made us safer. We get to outsource a lot of the security, and we come from the legacy model where we bolted security on at the end, right? We did all this development work, then we did security testing, found all kinds of defects, and found that our architecture was brittle to change at that point, right? So being able to build security in or be able to outsource that at the platform layer and know that the vendor's going to update the platform, all the applications riding on the platform, get the benefit of the tech refresh, get the advantage of the security patching. And I think we've also made a case for it's actually been cheaper for us. And we did a use case on a typical $1 million application in our agency. And what we found in the legacy model, where we were doing a lot of custom code, about 80% of our resources were spent on non-value add. So hosting, patching, tech refresh, data access. My pet peeve is, how many times have you written error code or data handling routines? We ought to be able to assemble pre-built components together and do it a lot faster. So what we found is 80% of our resources were spent on non-value add, 20% of our code was actually, or our time and resources were actually spent on delivering business value. In the low code, no code framework, we actually flipped the script, and we're spending only about 20% of our resources on those non-value add. And that's because we've switched to a licensing model where we're paying a licensing fee for that platform. And all those services come with that licensing fee. And as we start to release more and more applications on that platform, we're driving that per app cost down. And that frees up about 80% of our resources to work on truly delivering business value.
Great, thank you. Any other panelists want to weigh in on that one before we continue? Go for it, Brent.
All right, thank you. Yeah, just from the perspective, I think maybe external to an agency, I think what Brian said really resonated with me was that most of the shift that has to go on within, agencies or large companies is really people, process, and tools in that order. Usually, the bigger companies I deal with, they sort of look at their tool set and they say, okay, well, how do we do things a little bit faster, right? And what you really have to do is sort of think about what is the implication, like what is the process that we want to put in place to move faster? What does that look like? And then, sort of based on that, what are the KPIs we associate? And then what are the skills that we need to have our teams adapt to, and how do we reorganize around that? I think it's usually when you start thinking about people first, and then you start thinking about process, and really sort of orient around what do we want things to look like? What does that vision look like for how we're delivering? And what does fast look like? How do we measure it? And what are the skills necessary to get there? The tools come way later. That's coming from a tools vendor. I'm advising everyone on the phone, like, really think about your people process first. Really think through what are those KPIs, those metrics, and then just make your tool selection later. Right? It's super easy to sort of fall into a very religious dialogue based on what kind of tools you want to choose, and based on what's out there, what people have experiences with. I think that's kind of the wrong way to approach the problem.
I want to thank you, Brent, about that, because I made that mistake when I first started this journey and trying to get the buy-in from my management. And so I thought, maybe what will get their attention is the fact that if we get the right tool, we get these tools and automation, then then we'll get the proficiency and the performance upgrades that the increases that they're looking for. And that was when I was first in the journey. As I started going further and learning more about DevOps and what it really meant, I was like, oh my gosh, now I'm going to have to backtrack with these people, because it really isn't about the tools. It's like the processes for us, it really was the processes that we did not have in place. So I wish I'd met you then. You would have saved me like some embarrassing moments.
No, that's fair. And you know what? Like, I would not say that. As a human, I'm sure you're very unique, but I think the experience is super common. Everyone sort of, as technologists, we all kind of gravitate towards the tools, and that's a lot of tough lessons learned from everyone literally everyone I've spoken to has gone through multiple iterations of how do we adopt cloud, what makes us successful, and that's always where they land.
Brian, you were going to say something?
Yeah, as far as DevOps or DevSecOps, here at GSA, we have these wonderful, what I call smart commodities available for our government partners to use, like search.gov, challenge.gov, cloud.gov, and one I was a part of, login.gov. So it provides a single sign-on solution for those that are looking to do that. Others have talked about, why are we having to build out everything from scratch? So the idea of taking one of these smart commodities and focusing in on your core competency. But something like login.gov, it's analogous to outsourcing your front door of your house, right, to someone else. And it goes both ways, where it's got to be easy to use so you can get into the thing, but it's also got to be secure. So like there's a whole lot of trust associated with having that kind of service, and how we make everyone feel a whole lot better about that from a trust standpoint is that the login.gov team is using DevSecOps. They are just amazing in that regard, and so that the product is constantly evolving to improve that user experience, so that whoever it is, if it's someone coming in for whatever agency is using it to service the public or their employees, that experience is constantly improving. But then also on the security side, right? That it's your front door. You want to make sure it's locked and those folks getting in are the appropriate folks. So as threats evolve, DevSecOps allows that very rapid, very agile method towards it. As I talk with folks in the defense and intelligence space, I'll equate DevSecOps or DevOps, Raven, to really in doctrine, military doctrine, it's maneuver warfare, right? Or was called blitzkrieg, that ability to rapidly move in the battle space. That's what keeps you safe and what allows you to meet your objectives. It's not about spending 2 years building a castle or focusing on compliance. And so it's very counterintuitive. Gunpowder was invented a long time before blitzkrieg or joint combined arms came around in the military. And so back to what Brent was just saying there, the technology piece is easy. It's those processes and the people and the culture. Now the US Army is really, and most militaries are really familiar with, yeah, we move quickly on the battle space and that's what keeps us safe. But how long were castles being built until that happened? So anyway, login.gov, they use DevSecOps that improves that user experience. It also keeps that capability very secure for all involved, the users and their PII, as well as those government systems that are using login.gov.
Excellent, thank you. So let's move on to our third and final poll question. Alyssa, if you could please put that up on the screen again. On a scale from 1 to 5, how much has your agency's DevOps journey been affected by telework? So the options range from 1, not affected our journey at all, to 2, to 3, to 4, to 5, completely altered. So please take a moment and go ahead and respond to that poll question. Alyssa, could you please post the results when you feel like we've gotten a good amount of feedback from our audience? Okay, slightly affected us, looks like is the majority of that. So this question, first maybe Ian, you can kick us off with this. In this period of time of building the new normal, what emerging technology has led to strengthening federal DevSecOps from your agency's experience?
Yeah, so from our experience, when COVID-19 came along, we had our 5-year strategic plan for the Warfare Center had just ended. So we were going ahead and planning for the next 5 years. And then, we got thrown into max telework, COVID-19 happened. So it really made us, kind of take a look at, how are we, especially now that it's not an scenario, every the office is actually happening. So that really, accelerated our efforts to with solution in meetings face-to-face anymore. So, one of the biggest tools that has helped is the collaboration tools. We stood up for the entire Warfare Center, a Slack alternative chat for everybody to use, as well as I believe if it isn't just the Navy, DoD-wide, the Microsoft Teams to have the ability to, have face-to-face meetings to do collaboration. So, with groups or and talk to many people outside your group, project, or department, it was a very siloed for everyone to help that, there's a, DevOps channel in our chat. You can go in there. I have a question about Red Hat OpenShift. I have and collaborate the entire Warfare Center has been a game changer.
I can piggyback on what Ian said. I think for us, we have about 800,000 people deployed coast to coast, and very few of our teams are in the same physical location where they can have face-to-face interaction. So that amounted to a tremendous amount of travel for us as an agency, especially executives. And our move to Teams has really changed, I'm going to say, our effectiveness. Number one, I actually get more face time with my people and my peers over Teams than I did when I traveled. And some of that relates to how we do meetings, right? When you're in a meeting with somebody face to face, it's rude to be looking at your laptop or at your phone. You really are expected to have eye-to-eye contact and be fully engaged. When you're on a Teams meeting, you often can be troubleshooting something in a chat window. You can be engaged in a meeting. You can get, things. I'm not a big fan of multitasking, but there are occasions where that's appropriate, and I think we're seeing Teams be effective at that way. And I'm also seeing productivity gains. And I think my observation has been that people tend to, good or bad, maybe stay engaged a little longer at the end of the day, maybe dial in a little earlier in the morning. And so we're seeing, I think, our teams be more effective. And now, after a year, they're more used to being in a virtual environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Kirsten, I just wanted to add, when I was thinking about this particular question, and I would answer it just like you did, Daniel, like how our teams, we were always remote and really didn't impact us except for the fact we had to standardize on one collaboration tool, like everybody was doing all sorts of things. But the people who were impacted most were the stakeholders, because they were actually really used to getting into a meeting space, like a meeting room, and talking to people. They're really not high tech. And so the fact that they had to do this remotely, and I still do it, like I am on mute and start to talk, people do that still. But for our stakeholders, it was really a game changer, because they really were not used to the remote work and being able to talk about a project in a virtual environment. So I think that the stakeholders had a worse time than the technologists.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments from the panelists on that? Go for it, Brian.
Yeah, 18F was from the start a remote organization. And so when COVID hit, as I've talked with colleagues and friends, everyone's asked, like, yeah, how's it going after COVID? It was just another day at the office, the virtual remote office. And for anyone who's interested, there's a blog on remote work from 18F, just as far as the culture and the tools. Everybody's already kind of talked about it, but it dates back to like 2016 or something like that. But as far as just some of the tools that and what would you call it, individual and organizational behaviors to help bring people together, because physical space is important. It's tough to not have those collisions that you can have in the hallway and run into people and go, hey, and I'm thinking of this, or I'm working on that. And so anyway, there's workarounds. So I'd invite everyone to Google that. But anyway.
Go ahead, Brent.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I'll like pigpile on some of this. The HashiCorp as a company is remote centric, I would say. We recently released what we call HashiCorp Works. It's sort of a detailed post of just how the company works. The company was only started in 2012, but doesn't necessarily work for everybody. But I think it's a good snapshot of how we work. It's works.hashicorp.com. It's just at a cultural level, there's a lot of things that we do that are very unique. I worked at Red Hat for 11 years before this, and it's still certainly very different. Some of the other things I've noticed, even after everyone in the lockdown for coronavirus, was that everyone started talking about endpoint security, and that's not necessarily just laptops being out in the field and having VPN access. A lot of those endpoints are internal as well, and I think things like SolarWinds is kind of top of mind for everybody, where now all of a sudden you can't really trust necessarily everything that's on your network. Part of that's the apps, part of it's like the other ISV things you use, and you just want to make sure your data is secure. And so, how we think about the problem is implementing defense in depth. So I think, it's sort of on twofold. One is culturally, people had to figure out how to work remote and, just kind of figure out how to communicate and work together. What does that contract look like? And then from a technology-wise, actually, we saw a lot of our conversations shift. We're sort of top of mind for automation for everybody, but it's really around defense in depth. How do we start securing data, securing endpoints, and making sure that traffic internally is trusted and authorized?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Great, thank you. So let's jump into some audience questions. This one is for Daniel, and Hector is asking, do you have any organization metrics associated with your DevOps, DevSecOps efforts, military, civilian, contractors, etc.?
Yeah, good question. I'll tell you one of the important metrics. Yes, the answer is yes. One of the important ones that I'm measuring now, again, and this kind of is a continuation of that move from project to product. We have historically tracked and measured success, IT success, based on things like scope, schedule, and cost. And we can be, IT can be successful while our customer, our business customer, still fails. So we want to align with their metrics. And to the degree that we can help the customer define their metric and the algorithm for that metric, and we can automate that metric, allows us to match our success to their success. And it also gives us the ability to create hypothesis for new capabilities or new features that we want to build. How are we going to affect the business? And then we can test those and see whether or not those capabilities are really important. So we're starting to measure for our product lines how many of you have written down and are automating your business metrics. So that's an important one, and that helps us measure our transformation.
Great, thank you. And another one, I'm not sure which panelists would be best to answer it, but within DevOps, do you find that keeping the role of testing independent from the developers and integrators is valuable? If so, why or why not? Daniel shaking his head no. Oh, Raven's going to answer? All right, we'll do Raven and then Daniel.
Yeah, my head was shaking no too with Daniel. No, you have to integrate testing with throughout that whole workflow. Keeping the testing independent is going to make it so that you don't find any problems until the very end, and that's going to be costly. So my way we do it is we test, again, the developers do unit testing, and then every point of that pipeline, there's going to be some type of test until we get to the system testing. Daniel.
You said it perfectly. I defer to Raven.
Perfect. Any other panelists want to weigh in? Are we all in agreement there? All right, awesome. Ian, I do have a question for you. What are some DevSecOps best practices as it relates to GovCloud? And can you talk about AWS versus Microsoft and the impact of that remote work for the foreseeable future? So just elaborating a little bit more upon what you said earlier.
Yes. So, going with the hybrid cloud approach, so NSWC Dahlgren was an early adopter of both the AWS GovCloud as well as the Microsoft Azure GovCloud. Some of the best practices that we've found is, it's kind of what you would call the, cloud first or strategy. As much as you can get onto the cloud, you definitely want to try to do that, but you have to also kind of weigh the consequences of, things like that. So, one of the things that came from our leadership was that situation of, yes, we all are in max telework, and, having the pipelines and various things in the GovCloud where you can access them is great. But, if there was a situation where we were all in the office and we couldn't get out, of our internal network, our RDT&E network, could we still operate, do development, builds, everything, and get, the work done for our critical systems? So, the best practices for us are, if you want to go to the cloud, get as much on the cloud. We, thoroughly agree, but you need to make sure you have that backup plan that if something was to happen and you could not reach, the GovCloud, or you needed to go back to on-prem, to have those backups there and in place so you can continue to do your work.
Thank you for answering that one. So unfortunately, we are almost out of time, but I do want to do a little lightning round, 30 seconds or less. Each panel list, what do you want to leave our audience with? Could be a piece of tangible advice, a quote that you want them to live by when it comes to their DevOps journey, whatever it may be. Let's start with Raven, and then we'll go around.
Do your homework and learn about it, especially when you're getting started. My passion is with the people who are just getting started, because it was hard for me, and it took a lot of conferences and talking to a lot of people in order to get on track to what was needed in our organization and to implement things and things having to break. So if you're the person that's responsible for at least advising your teams and your leadership about DevOps and where you're going to go, read up on it, do some homework, evaluate your teams and see where they are, so that you know what you need to focus on. Is it the people? Is it the process? Maybe it is the tools, but you really need to understand your business problem in order to understand how DevOps can actually work for you.
Great, thank you. Brent, next.
Yeah, people, process, tools in that order. Think about not just security is not the checkbox at the end, it's integral. And it's key to success, having those stakeholders on board. Like defense in depth is really the sort of the name of the game in today's world. Not just moving fast, but doing so securely. And HashiCorp is here to help.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, I firmly agree with Brent on people. For me, it's about culture. Culture is the hardest thing to tackle, and you have to tackle it first. And my second tip would be read everything from Gene Kim. It's kind of the go-to for DevOps.
Awesome, thank you. Ian?
Yes, what has kind of guided my journey is a quote by someone who worked at NSWC Dahlgren, Grace Hopper. And the quote is, the most dangerous phrase in the entire human language is, "We've always done it that way." So, for me, it's, always be asking questions. It may be, the best process out there, the best tool, but, always ask those questions, always be thinking of different ways to do something. And that's how we're really going to push everything forward.
Awesome. And last but not least, Brian, take us home.
Oh boy, that's putting a lot on me. But yeah, I think everybody kind of hit it there. I would say these times have been particularly tough through COVID and everything else. Make sure you're taking care of yourself, make sure you're taking care of your teams. Because it will be you and them pushing for this terrific change. It's scary. Do the brave, right thing. And that's typically by being willing to try new stuff, understanding, as Raven said, toes will be stubbed. You will fail in small little ways, but that's required to do something bigger. And as Ian was describing, a changing business as usual. What gets people locked into how they've always done it is because they're scared about trying anything else, because you will stub your toe. So do the brave right thing, take care of your teams, because it'll be your folks that are doing the hard work and failing, and you need to make sure as a leader there feel safe enough to do that brave thing.
Awesome. I think that was a great way to wrap it up. If all of our panelists could please smile for the camera, I'm going to take a screenshot in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Awesome. That hour went by so fast, but this was so much fun. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. I want to thank our partners at HashiCorp again, and our super awesome panelists and our keynote, Nick. Just been such a great hour. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you Tuesday for ATARC's Integrated Cyber Strategies Virtual Summit, where we will be discussing all things zero trust and cybersecurity. So everyone have a great day, and we really look forward to seeing you at the next one.